Namaskaram, Ernesto, Michael, José. Today we're here to discuss one question, and let's see what we can get out of it. The question says, if this is a path of happiness, how is it that devotees feel unfit, feelings of failure, being full of flaws, or unsuitable for this path? Are those feelings an inevitable effect of looking for the restoration of our natural condition, or that shows we are still highly immature, spiritually speaking?
Bueno, en la pregunta hay algo que creo que es importante matizar de manera expresa.
In the question, there is something I think there is we can give some nuances regarding the way the question is expressed.
Cuando habla de si hemos de restaurar nuestra condición natural, porque es como si de alguna manera nuestra condición natural hubiera sido desinstaurada.
Because it says that we have to restore our natural condition, as if somehow our natural condition had been unrestored. I don't know how to say it.
En relación a esta pregunta confluyen dos cuestiones que coexisten al mismo tiempo.
And there are two questions coexisting here at the same time.
Por una parte, es normal que cuando alguien llega a un camino como este, en la mayoría de los casos,
on one hand, it's natural or normal that when someone comes to a path like this, in the majority of the cases,
subestime bastante la verdadera entidad y la verdadera fuerza de las Visaya Vasanas, que son las inclinaciones para experimentar otras cosas distintas de lo que realmente somos.
Is that usually to underrate the strength of the Vishaya Vasanas, which are the tendencies or the tendencies to experience things other than ourselves, or what we actually are.
Y el conocimiento y el entendimiento intelectual, que suele ser bastante sorprendente y aliviante a la mayor parte de las personas que vienen con grandes ansiedades y aflicciones.
And sorry, Ernesto, you said
el conocimiento, el entendimiento intelectual y el entendimiento o la comprensión mental para muchas personas que vienen con grandes aflicciones y ansiedades y preocupaciones les hace creer, al aliviarse en cierto modo temporalmente eso, que ya han tenido una comprensión verdaderamente profunda y que no tienen que trabajar en sus vasanas.
And the people, intellectual concepts and the understanding, the comprehension of the teachings intellectually may be a relief for some people who come to this path with many things that affect them, like grief. They feel grief, or they feel other things that for them it can be like a, ¿cómo has dicho al final?
Sí, y creen que no tienen que realizar ningún esfuerzo en el terreno y en el ámbito de la voluntad.
And they think they don't have to make any effort in the field of will.
Claro. De ahí que paralelamente ahí normalmente suele haber un cierto grado de inmadurez desde el punto de vista de cuánto nos hemos llegado a girar hacia nuestra verdadera naturaleza.
So there is a certain degree of immaturity as to how much we have turned within towards our real nature.
Aunque nuestra verdadera naturaleza es totalmente madura siempre, no experimenta cambio alguno ni requiere de ningún tipo de desarrollo de ninguna clase.
Even though our real nature is always mature and it doesn't undergo any change whatsoever.
Por lo tanto, diría que realmente los verdaderos devotos de Bhagavan han de tener la suficiente humildad como para no abandonar nunca una posición de principiante.
So, true devotees of Bhagavan should have the attitude of never quitting or abandoning an attitude of being a beginner,
mientras no sean capaces de permanecer en un estado de pura autoconsciencia o Atma-sarupa sin interrupción durante mucho tiempo y con un alto grado de amor e intensidad.
so long as they are not able to remain in the state of self-attentiveness or Atma-sarupa uninterruptedly for a very long time and without the love required for it.
No sé qué pensáis los demás, qué os gustaría aportar.
So what do you think of that? What else do you want to add to that?
Yes. I would have answered slightly differently. That is, regarding the first sentence, if this is a path for happiness, how is it that devotees feel unfit, feelings of failure, being full of flaws and unsuitable for this path? Happiness is our own real nature. All the other qualities mentioned here, being unfit, being a failure, being full of flaws, being unsuitable for this path, this is the nature of ego. We who are following this path are ego. So it is precisely because of the defective nature of ego, but it is necessary for us to follow this path. And all these feelings of being unfit, inadequate, and so on, these will continue till the very end, until ego is destroyed. Because this is the nature of ego. The very nature of ego is to be constantly going outwards, constantly seeking happiness in things other than ourselves. So it's not that we start on this path and it's difficult at first, and then we get more and more skill and it becomes easier and easier. As we go deeper and deeper in this path, we recognize more and more clearly our own unfitness, our own lack of love to hold on to self-attentiveness. Holding on to self-attentiveness is not actually difficult. The reason it seems difficult to us is that we really don't want to, because holding on to self-attentiveness, it dissolves ego. The more we hold, the deeper we go into this self-attentiveness, the more ego is dissolving. And because we are not yet willing to surrender ourselves completely, it seems to us to be difficult. What is not actually difficult seems difficult because we don't want to, we are unwilling to surrender ourselves. We are unwilling to dissolve in our source. So regarding the second part of the question, are these feelings an inevitable effect of looking for the restoration of our natural condition, or that shows that we are still highly immature, spiritually speaking? No, I don't think it shows that we are still highly immature, spiritually speaking. If the more we feel I am fit for this path, the more immature we are. As we go deeper in this path, as we mature in following this path, we will become more and more clearly aware of our shortcomings, our inadequacies. Because if we think that, oh, I'm fit for this path, I'm able to hold on to self-attentiveness, I'm able to sit with my eyes closed for 2 hours and hold on to self-attentiveness, we are actually just deluding ourselves. Whatever we're holding on to, it's something other than self-attentiveness. Because if we're actually holding on to self-attentiveness, we'll feel the full force of the Vishaya vasanas pulling our attention outwards. That is why in songs like Aksharamlai, Bhagavan is obviously Bhagavan has attained all that he's praying for there already, but what he's reflecting there is the state of a highly mature soul who is ready to, for example, in verse 9, I think, he says, that means destroying myself, destroying me, ipodu, now. If you do not unite with me, destroying me now. So that shows the extreme maturity, but he's ready to be destroyed here and now. So that is the state of true maturity. So the more mature we become, the more we will become aware of our inadequacies. In this verse 9, he expresses how willingly he's ready to give himself and be destroyed here and now. But in the previous two verses, what was he talking about? He was in verse 7, I think, he was talking about, I'll just get the verses. Verse 7, he was talking about the mind running. He said, Une matri oda tu ulatinmel, urudia irupayarnacha, be seated firmly upon this mind so that it does not run out cheating you. So he's there lamenting about the running there implies running outwards. And in the verse 8, he begins, Ursutrulum, the mind which is but roams about the world. So that the mind which roams about the world may subside, seeing you uninterruptedly, show your beauty. So here he's talking about the state of his mind. His mind is still running outwards. His mind is still roaming about the world. And in the verse after verse 9, he says, why this sleep when others are pulling me? Those others who are pulling are the Vishaya Vasanas. And in the next verse, he says, when the 5 sense thieves entered my heart, were you not in my heart? So the 5 sense thieves again mean the Vishaya Vasanas, but are pulling the mind outwards. So even in such a state of extreme maturity, when he's ready to surrender himself and be destroyed here and now, he's still recognizing the nature of the mind is to be constantly running outwards. So the Vishaya Vasanas will not be destroyed until ego is destroyed. It's not that slowly the Vishaya Vasanas will get less, and then one day when all the Vishaya Vasanas are destroyed, then ego will be destroyed. No, the only way to destroy the Vishaya Vasanas completely is the destruction of their root, namely ego. But in order to be willing to surrender ego, the Vishaya Vasanas need to be weakened to a considerable extent. So in the state of extreme spiritual maturity, the Vishaya Vasanas are weakened to a great extent. But just because they're weak doesn't mean that they don't fight back ferociously. If a group of hunters are hunting a tiger with a spear, they may, with each one of them having a spear or a sword or a knife or something, but the tiger will be very much wounded, very much weakened, and eventually they'll manage to corner the tiger. But when the tiger is cornered, though it is very weak because of having so many wounds, it will fight back with great ferocity because its very life is at stake. So even when the weaker our Vishaya Vasanas become, the more ferociously ego will fight back with. I mean, the relationship between ego and its Vishaya Vasanas. Ego is like the general, and the Vishaya Vasanas are like the soldiers. So the ego's army is the army of Vishaya Vasanas. That's what gives ego strength. So when the army is much depleted, almost defeated, and cornered, then it will fight back with great ferocity because their very life is at stake. So this path is it will never be just plain sailing. The deeper we go in this path, the stronger the resistance to going deeper. So just because we're aware of all our unfitness, our failure, our lack of love to go within and so on, that doesn't mean we're immature. The more mature we become, the more clearly we'll become aware of our unfitness. People who are immature, as Ernesto was saying, they think with a little bit of, they've read these things, they understand, yes, oh, I'm just consciousness. So there's nothing more for me to do. I don't have to do anything. They they will easily fool themselves into thinking that they've attained something just because of a little bit of understanding. They may also have some experience, some so-called spiritual experience, and they may think, "Oh, now I'm self-realized." That is the immature mind.
Es muy importante, Michael, algo que has dicho en relación a esto, porque la percepción...
Sí. Very important something you said regarding this.
Porque la percepción de fracasado o de inmaduro que normalmente suelen tener la mayor parte de los sadhakas,
because the impression that of being a failure or immature that many of sadhakas have,
no es una percepción verdaderamente integral y profunda que te hace reconocerte totalmente impotente y totalmente incapaz como ego.
It's not a very integral perception of being failure that really makes you fully aware to be fully impotent as ego.
Solo cuando llegamos a una absoluta impotencia y no hay ninguna sensación de ningún poder que tú puedas tener para llegar a liberarte de nada.
Only when you get to a fully impotent state where there is no any other power for you to get liberation.
Poder personal, quiero decir, poder del ego.
Power, ego's power.
Es entonces cuando la Chit Shakti verdaderamente se pone al mando completamente.
It's when the Chit Shakti takes charge, really.
Y por otra parte, de lo que comentabas antes también...
On the other hand, what you were commenting earlier,
hay otro aspecto que me parece también muy, muy importante.
There is another aspect that seems to me very important.
Y es que en base a una búsqueda de una felicidad en lo externo, jamás podemos llegar a sentir un verdadero sentimiento de avance.
And we're based on search for happiness and external things. We can never, nunca podemos
llegar a tener un verdadero sentimiento de avance.
We can never really have a true sense of progression.
Porque todo el tiempo son ciclos de satisfacción e insatisfacción.
Because they're just cycles of satisfaction, insatisfaction.
Porque la verdadera felicidad no está ahí afuera.
Because true happiness is not out there.
No sé, Carlos, ¿qué opinas? Me gustaría también escucharte, hermano, si te apetece.
Yeah, sure. I think that it gives me the impression, because when I wrote the question, I was thinking that, as you said, Michael, that if you are immature, you're going to think that vasanas are whatever. I mean, they don't matter, or you are consciousness, you are not the doer, and there's nothing. Prarabdha is all predestined. So you, what else do you have? What is there left to do? Yeah. So, but if someone who feels really unfit, or feels that is a failure, that their attention is constantly going outwards, despite trying or making the effort to turn the attention back within, as it is of this, have the impression that there are like two levels or something. I mean, on one hand, superficially, you feel a failure, like you are, no matter what you do, your attention keeps going outwards. And another level, more deeper level, maybe, that you don't know how is that working. I mean, your practice is working and you don't know at what point you are. But there is some kind of progression of some sort, yeah. But you're not aware of it, or you cannot have any idea or that.
Yes. This is coming a little close to something else I was about to say. That is, the highly mature aspirant will feel their own inadequacies and lack of love and everything. But their response to that is increased determination to continue trying. An immature person, when we're early on in this path, when we begin to recognize our own weakness, our own inadequacies, there are many people who have an inclination to give up, who tend to give up. Oh, no, this is too... They may not admit it to themselves, but they cease really trying because they feel, in their heart of hearts, they feel this is too difficult for me. I'm not going to be able to do this. So they don't have that resolve to continue. They give up trying. So the response of the mature mind and the response of the immature mind to the recognition of our inadequacies will be different. So the more if our mind is mature, and when we recognize our inadequacies, the longing to surrender ourselves will become stronger and stronger, because we recognize the very nature of this ego. Inadequacy, lack of love, this is the very nature of ego. We can't, so long as ego is there, it will always be inadequate. It will always lack the love to turn within. So the longing to surrender ourselves completely will be intensified in the mature mind. The more we recognize our inadequacies, whereas an immature mind, recognizing the inadequacies may lead to a sort of defeatism. Okay, well, I can't do this. And people, they start off all enthusiastic, and then slowly they settle down into a routine, and they don't really, they lose that fire of enthusiasm because they're too put off by their own inadequacies. So what is a highly mature? How can we measure how mature we are? As Bhagavan said when he was asked about are there any signs of progress, Bhagavan said perseverance is the sign of progress. It's the only sign of progress, because it doesn't matter how inadequate we may be, how inadequate we may recognize ourselves to be. The important question is, do we persevere? Do we continue trying? If we give up, or if our efforts become half-hearted, if we don't really constantly try to turn our attention within, in spite of all our inadequacies, that shows the mind is immature. That's one thing I was going to say. Another thing I was going to say, Ernesto, when you mentioned about Chit Shakti, when Chit Shakti takes over, another name for that Chit Shakti is grace. Grace is always there. It's always playing its part. But we are obstructing the work of grace. By rising as ego, we're obstructing the work of grace. So what is required on our path is to yield ourselves to grace. So in the mature mind, the more we recognize our inadequacies, the more we recognize our lack of love, the more we will be willing to yield ourselves to grace, the more we be willing to let grace take over, as it were. So these are very, very subtle things. When we talk about it in words, our words will always fail to adequately capture what it is. Like in some books, it's recorded, but as the Bhagavan said something that when you try and finally you give up, that's when the grace takes over. But I think in some books, when I've read this sort of idea, I think it's not always been adequately understood by the person who's recording what Bhagavan said, because this is a very, very subtle thing. Grace does take over, but it takes over only to the extent to which we yield ourselves. And we will yield ourselves only to the extent that first we have to have a burning love to know and to be what we actually are. And we need to fully recognize the inadequacy of ego, of the inadequacy of ourself as ego. Then only the willingness to yield ourselves. But that in order to yield ourselves, we have to hold on to ourselves. So it's what what is happening at the deep level. The deeper we go within, the more subtle the process is. So we can't, by our mind, we can't adequately understand these things. But the important thing we have to understand is that the key to success in this path is to persevere in trying to be self-attentive. Doesn't matter how many times we fail. As Bhagavan says, however many thoughts arise, so what? As and when each thought arises, we need to investigate to whom. That means we need to turn our attention away from a thought back towards ourselves, the one to whom the thought has appeared. So it's our perseverance is the most important. That's all that's in our hand. We can persevere in trying. And the more we try to attend to ourselves, the more we are thereby yielding ourselves to that grace, to the chit shakti, to that power of awareness that is ever shining in our heart as I. So it's such a subtle process. We can try and understand with our mind, but however we understand it, our understanding will be inadequate. But the important, it's not necessary for us to be able to conceptualize this thing. But what is important is that we follow this path, we persevere in trying to be self-attentive.
El otro día, en una clase, Michael, Carlos, José, hablábamos de la similitud que puede haber entre un deportista de alto rendimiento y un sadhaka en esta vía de Bhagavan.
The other day at a class, the study group, we were comparing the similarities between a sportman, like the one who competes professionally,
Yes.
and the one sadhaka in the spiritual path.
Yes.
Porque esa perseverancia no es tanto la aspiración que a lo mejor ilusoriamente muchos tienen de ser capaces de perseverar en cuanto a mantenerse ahí en esa autoatención de manera constante.
Otra vez, perdón, hermano.
Sí, que esa perseverancia no tiene tanto que ver con la ilusoria idea que muchos tienen de ser capaz de mantenerse en la autoatención de forma constante.
And that perseverance is not the illusory idea of remaining in that self-attentiveness constantly,
sino en el volver a tratar de atenderse o de permanecer en lo que realmente somos cada vez que se cae.
but on trying to attend to ourselves each time we fall.
Exactly.
Time and again.
It doesn't matter how many times our attention is going outwards. If we're really following this path, our attention will be going outwards. The vasanas will be pulling us outwards. But we need to persevere in bringing the attention back again and again and again.
Como cuando vemos estas imágenes en las películas de que está alguien con dos piedras tratando de hacer fuego.
Just like when you see one of these scenes in the movie where someone with two stones are trying to make a fire.
Y lo intenta una vez y no, pero no deja de intentarlo hasta que finalmente.
And it doesn't work, it keeps trying until it finally lights, no? There's a spark and there is fire.
If you're desperate to have a fire, if a fire is the only thing that will keep you alive, if you're in very cold conditions, for example, and it's only by lighting a fire that you can survive, it doesn't matter how many times you fail to light the fire, you're going to continue trying until your dying breath. Such needs to be the earnestness with which we try.
Sí.
So it's not what, sorry, Ernesto.
Sí, sorry.
It's not what Ernesto said that actually that we underrate the vasanas. It's more that actually one becomes fully aware that vasanas are really big.
Yeah.
The strength is really big. No,
that is the
if
pure.
You see the vasanas they're decreasing, they're weakening, I'm conquering my vasanas. The other way around.
The purer our mind becomes, the more clearly we'll be aware of the dirt in it. If you've got a very dirty shirt, you won't see all the deeply embedded stains in it. Only if you wash the shirt a couple of times, then you remove the superficial dirt, then you see how deeply embedded some of the stains are. Likewise with the mind, the deeper we go within, the more we recognize how deeply ingrained these vasanas are in us, how reluctant we are to surrender ourselves completely. So, but Sadhuam used to give an analogy. If you see a crescent moon, you can't see any craters in it. Even if you see a half moon, in a half moon, you may be able to see the craters very faintly. But craters become clear only to the extent that the moon becomes full. In a full moon, then you can see the craters most clearly. Likewise, the purer our mind becomes, the more clearly we'll be aware of our own inadequacies. See, take an ordinary worldly person. If you ask a worldly person, do you have desires? Yes, of course I've got desires. I want money, I want this, I want that. They're very well aware of their desires. But if you talk to them about vasanas, they won't be understanding what you're talking about, because the vasanas are those same desires in their subtle seed form. So we're all aware of desires, but to become aware of it's only to the extent to which we go within, but we recognize that those desires arise from very subtle inclinations. And that's where the real problem lies. We may be able to give up our grosser desires. Taking sannyasa, leading the life of a sannyasi may be relatively easy. Or even if we don't outwardly live the life of a sannyasi, we may be able to give up our desire for not completely, but we may be able to a great extent give up desire for money. Okay, if I have enough just to live on, that's all I need. I don't need to bother about money. So our desires will be becoming less, but the more the grosser forms of the desires drop off, the more we will become aware of those desires are still remaining in a seed form. The seed form is the vasanas. So the deeper we go within, the more clearly we will be aware of the vasanas. That's why if you pay close attention to Bhagavan's teachings, Bhagavan doesn't ask us to be concerned about thoughts. He says, however many thoughts rise, so what? What Bhagavan is asking us to be concerned about is the vasanas. And even the vasanas, how can we overcome those vasanas? We can't overcome vasanas by fighting them. We can overcome the vasanas only by clinging to self-attentiveness. But the problem is not the thoughts. The problem is the vasanas that give rise to those thoughts.
Y si seguimos así, ¿no? El problema no es que estas vasanas emerjan, sino el no darle prioridad a atender al origen de las vasanas.
No darle prioridad a atender.
No darle prioridad a atender principalmente a de dónde surge esa vasana.
Que eso es lo más importante, ¿no?
Claro.
And if we go trace it back even further, the most important thing is to trace back where those vasanas are originated.
Como,
yes.
Como cuando Ganapati Muni, ¿no? le preguntó a Bhagavan, dame el secreto de cómo puedo hacer el mantra, y le dijo, mira el silencio de donde emerge el mantra y en donde el mantra se disuelve.
Like when Ganapati Muni asked Bhagavan, they give me the secret to where there's the mantra, no? That I need to recitate. And Bhagavan said that go back to the silence where the mantra originates. ¿No?
Yes.
Hay algo también interesante en esto que estabas diciendo, Michael, en la cuestión de que cuando uno se encuentra con una vasana que se debilita fácilmente.
There is also something that interesting in something that you said, Michael, that when one come across a vasana that is easily weakened,
o así parece,
or so it seems,
se puede llegar a la conclusión, a la falsa conclusión de creer que el resto también van a tener las patitas muy cortas.
You can easily come to the conclusion that all others are going to be the same way, are going to respond the same way.
Yes, true. But also, we never really know that we've conquered a vasana. We may seem to have conquered a vasana, or it may seem to us. That is, we're most aware of vasanas when they rise as likes, dislikes, desires, and attachment. So certain likes and dislikes and desires and attachments may seem to have dropped off. So we may think we've conquered those vasanas, but all of a sudden, it will suddenly surge up again. So we cannot be confident that we have eradicated vasanas until we have eradicated their root. And then there's no one left to be confident. The root of the vasanas is ego, the one whose vasanas they are. That is the problem. That's what the ultimate problem we're trying to deal with. Is if we kill the general, the whole army, the enemy army will disperse. But in order to get to the general who's surrounded by his army, we've got to be cutting down the vasanas. And we may sometimes think we've cut them down, and they rise up again and come from behind us, ones we thought we had cut down. So this is a battle in which we cannot know how we are progressing in this battle. All we know is we are fighting for our life, for our true life, our life as we are fighting to restore our own real nature, to regain or to return to our own real nature. So this is a fight more than a fight for life. So we just have to go on fighting. We cannot know how much progress we're making. All we know is that Bhagavan has shown us the direction in which we need to travel. The direction in which we need to travel is turning within, holding on to self-attentiveness. We need to just do so. It doesn't matter. That is, the annihilation of ego may come the next moment. It may come after 100 lifetimes. It doesn't matter. All we are in the midst of a battle. We can't be thinking about whether are we going to win, are we going to lose. We just have to fight.
Y en cuanto a lo que decías, Michael, del tema de la gracia, a veces puede parecer que hasta que no llegamos a rendirnos lo suficiente, la gracia no interviene más.
And regarding the comment you said about grace, it may seem that until we are not able to surrender enough, grace doesn't step in or doesn't intervene.
Yes, but grace is actually doing everything.
All the time.
All the time, yes. But the problem is we are constantly obstructing the work of grace by rising as ego, by allowing our attention to go outwards. We are constantly obstructing the work of grace. That's why Bhagavan says that just like the prey that has fallen in the jaws of the tiger cannot escape, those who have been caught in the glance of Guru's grace will surely be saved and will never be forsaken. Eninum, however, nevertheless, it is necessary to follow without fail the path shown by Guru. Because if we're not following the path shown by Guru, we're obstructing the work of grace.
Claro.
So we need to play our part. Ultimately, we will find all the effort we made to turn within and to hold on to self-attentiveness was driven only by grace. It's grace alone that is making us make that effort. But for us, it seems that we are making effort. Our attention is going outwards. We need to turn within. The truth is, grace is our own real nature. Grace is not something other than ourselves. It's not something up there in heaven that's going to come and fall down on our heads or anything. Grace is our own real nature. Grace is what is shining in our heart as eye. So we need to yield ourselves to that by holding fast to it. We need to take refuge in grace, which is always shining in our heart. And we take refuge in it only by holding on to it, by not allowing our attention to go outwards.
Me recuerda
But
algo
we fail and we fail and we fail, but we have to keep on trying.
Me recuerda algo que decía Alan Watts cuando hablaba de que al representar la película de Hamlet, Dios o Brahman o Atman intervenía moviendo los brazos y el habla del actor.
It reminds me of the película de Hamlet, or
no, en la obra de teatro de Hamlet.
La obra de teatro. It reminds me of something that Alan Watts used to say, that in the play of theater of Hamlet, that when God was represented, it was said to be to actuar a través de los...
Hacía que se moviera cualquier movimiento del actor, de sus brazos, de su boca, de sus manos, eran impulsados, como dice Bhagavan también, ¿no? por la gracia, ¿no?
That any movement that or gesture or say things that the actor said was impulsed or made was caused by God or Brahman.
Pero que siempre había también una sala verde detrás del escenario.
But there was behind the stage, there was like a green hall or something.
Donde a veces Brahman, Atman, se muestra completamente a sí mismo y no interviene de forma más evidente ante el pensador.
Where Brahman steps in or intervenes in a more direct way del pensador, ¿no?
Más claro para el soñador, de una forma más clara para el soñador, en esa sala verde que está detrás de la
that green hall, in a more evident way, it showed itself for the thinker.
Sí. Cuanto más vamos a la sala verde, que sería ir a Atma Swarupa, cuanto más nos establecemos en nuestra verdadera naturaleza,
the more we go to the green room, or like the more we go to our real nature,
al llegar al escenario, más entendemos que no somos Hamlet.
And the more we go back to the stage, the more we understand that we are not Hamlet.
Y menos interferimos a que cualquier movimiento esté hecho siempre por él, por Dios, por Brahman, nunca por nosotros como cuerpo.
The less we interfere, that any movement that we do is made by God and not made by us as a body or as ego.
Es porque mucha gente cree que la gracia interviene más cuando ya te has rendido.
Many people think that grace usually comes in more when you have surrendered.
Pero en todo momento, incluso cuando nos estamos identificando grandemente con un pensamiento, también eso está dentro del prarabdha karma y la gracia es lo que lo ha ordenado.
But even when we are identifying ourselves with a thought, grace is behind that and it has ordained that.
Por el prarabdha.
Based on the prarabdha.
Yes, but it's very much more complex and subtle than that. To put it very simply, how I would express it is, whatever effort we make to go outwards is effort made by ego. That is, ego is driving the effort. Any effort to go within is driven by grace. The problem is we're making more effort to go outwards than we're making effort to go within because ego is constantly asserting itself. That's why ego needs to yield itself. Grace is drawing our attention back within, but we need to yield ourselves to that pull of grace that is drawing our attention within. So when we are making effort to turn within, what we are actually doing is yielding ourselves to the pull of grace, which is drawing our attention inwards. So long as we're going outwards, it's all ego's effort. Yes, grace is ordaining the fruit of our karmas, and making us experience them in the form of prarabdha. But that's all. Grace is doing that in order to. The ultimate aim of grace is only to pull us within. It's giving us those fruit of our past karmas, which will be most conducive to putting us in a frame of mind where we're willing to turn within. But the sole aim of grace is not to ordain the fruit of our karmas. That is just a means. That's not the end. The end is to draw our attention within. So the more we allow our mind, we experience the prarabdha only to the extent to which we allow our mind to go outwards. As Bhagavan said, prarabdha affects only the outward turning mind. It cannot prevent the mind turning within. So let us forget about prarabdha. Let us forget about all this. Our sole aim, if we are following Bhagavan's path, is to try more and more to turn within. Because by turning within, we are yielding to grace. And by allowing our attention to go outwards, we're obstructing the work of grace. So I find that analogy given by Alan Watts, it's a bit complex. It's a bit, from a dull head like mine, it doesn't make much sense. But this, to me, makes sense. But we, at every moment, we have a choice. Do we allow our attention to go outwards towards anything other than ourselves, or do we turn it back within? We are constantly making the wrong choice, but let's not be disheartened. Let us, every moment that we make the right choice of turning our attention within, we are getting closer and closer to our goal. That's all we need to know about.
Pero incluso cuando hacemos un esfuerzo para hacer o decir algo, si este tiene que llevar a una experiencia, ese esfuerzo, aunque sea para una experiencia egoica, movida por el ego, si finalmente ocurre,
but even if we have to make an effort that will lead to something else, if we have to make an effort as ego,
si finalmente ocurre esa experiencia, aunque haya sido promovida por el ego,
if that experience finally ends up happening, even if it's been caused by ego,
esa experiencia, si ha ocurrido, es parte del prarabdha.
That experience is part of the prarabdha.
Con lo cual, la gracia sabe que desde nuestra inmadurez, mientras no hayamos llegado a comprender profundamente, no vamos a poder evitar hacer esfuerzos que provengan del ego.
So, say that again, Ernesto.
Sí, que digamos que la inteligencia suprema, ¿no? del ser sabe que aun iniciando una acción desde el punto de vista del ego, o haciendo un esfuerzo desde el ego,
Supreme Intelligence knows that even that if we make an effort starting from the starting point of ego, from ego,
si eso tiene que terminar generando una experiencia,
if that has to end up causing an experience,
esa experiencia forma parte del prarabdha.
that experience is part of the prarabdha.
Y ese prarabdha nos ayudará a debilitar nuestras inclinaciones para hacer esfuerzos desde el ego.
And that prarabdha will help us to weaken our inclinations to make efforts from ego.
Yes, in a sense, but the thing is, whatever actions need to be done by our mind, speech, or body in order for our prarabdha to unfold, we will be made, that these three instruments of action, mind, speech, and body, will be made to do those actions. So we shouldn't even concern ourselves with that. Our sole aim should be trying to turn within more and more and more. Let's not concern ourselves about prarabdha. When we allow our attention to go outwards, we will experience the prarabdha. That's inevitable. Our aim is not to experience the prarabdha, not to allow our attention to go outwards. Our sole aim is to try more and more and more to turn our attention within. So we need to be very, very focused. That is what Bhagavan taught us about prarabdha, is to make us understand, but we need not be concerned about the prarabdha because it's already determined what this person, Michael or Ernesto or Carlos or José, is to experience. It's already predetermined. And whatever actions need to be done by the mind, speech, and body of this person will be made to do those actions. That has nothing to do with us. We are not this person. We are that which is shining in Mahata's eye. So our sole interest should be in holding on to this eye. So what Bhagavan taught us about prarabdha is only to make us understand, but we need not concern ourselves about this outward life. We need not concern ourselves about whatever actions need to be done in order to experience the prarabdha, because we're going to be made, mind, speech, and body are going to be made to do those actions. The only thing we need to be concerned about is turning within more and more and more and more.
Lo mencionaba en el sentido de que si solo aprendiéramos por conciencia, no tendríamos que aprender también por experiencia.
I mention it because if we only si solo tuviéramos que aprender por conciencia,
si solo pudiéramos,
if we could only learn by consciousness,
sí.
We wouldn't need to learn by experience.
Pero muchas veces es la experiencia la que nos lleva a darnos cuenta del sinsentido de querer seguir yendo hacia afuera.
But sometimes it's the experience that make us realize the nonsense of still keep going outwards.
Prarabdha certainly has its part to play. So long as we allow our attention to go outwards, we're going to experience all the blows of Prarabdha. But what our focus should be is on going within.
So, so Michael, the thing is with Prarabdha and the actions done by us as made by God, that we do in accordance with our Prarabdha, and the ones that we are based on our free will, is that, for example, if I'm told, I don't know, someone tells me to go on a trip that I don't want to go to that trip. Yeah, I'm faced. It seems to me that I have a decision to make. Okay, I have to say no or yes. Maybe if I say no, that answer may have been maybe I've been made to say no to that answer.
Maybe, yes.
Maybe.
But
I mean, I feel that I did it myself. I said no, but it could have been that God made me say that.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So I always have the impression it's me.
Yes, but so that's why we cannot distinguish to what extent any action that we do, to what extent it's driven by God's will, to what extent it's driven by our will. It may be driven by both. But these things we need not concern us.
Yeah, that's the thing. We face many situations that put us in front of a situation that, oh no, it's me. It's only me who have to decide.
Yeah. That's because of this kartrutva buddhi, because we experience this mind, speech, and body as ourself. Whatever actions are done by them, I have done them. So
I mean, we don't need to distinguish. Exactly. But we are, because of that, we are always hesitating. But what do I do in this situation? If I don't do anything, the situation is going to be? I mean, it's going to be a disaster or something.
We need not concern ourselves about these things. That's why Bhagavan said this is all determined by prarabdha. Whatever you are to experience, you will experience. Whatever decisions you need to make in order to experience that, you'll be made to make. And supposing you make a decision, supposing someone asks you to come on a trip, for example, you have to decide either to go, yes or no. So it's best to try to avoid unnecessary. I mean, Bhagavan, when someone asks Bhagavan, how to know which actions are according to prarabdha, which actions are not according to prarabdha. Bhagavan said, whatever comes, reject it. Whatever sits on your head in spite of you rejecting it, that is prarabdha. So if someone asks you to go on a trip, no, you say. If it's your destiny to go on that trip, somehow or other your decision not to go will be overridden.
So it's not like that movie. I don't know if you guys know that movie. It's called the Yes Man. It's a movie of someone who goes to a coach or a guru.
Yeah.
And they are depressed, and the guru says, if you want to really find happiness, you say yes to everything.
Yes.
And you will be happy. You will see how everything it's true. It starts like this, no? It starts. He says yes to everyone. Okay, I'll go there. I'll do that. But finally, it's a mess.
Pero sí tendríamos que, aunque no sea la prioridad principal.
But we should, even though it's not the main priority.
No tanto diferenciar entre qué acción o palabra o acto va a ser hecho desde la voluntad o desde el destino.
Not what words or what deed or what thought is made by destiny or by our will.
Sino si esa voluntad proviene de una inclinación de una subhavasana o de una asubhavasana.
Maybe that will come from a subhavasana or a subhavasana.
Mientras nos sintamos empujados a ir hacia afuera y no prioricemos ir con la autoindagación hacia lo que somos.
So long as we are being pushed to attend outwards and not by self-investigation to attend to ourselves.
Al menos tratar de seguir la dirección que notemos que nos hace sentir en paz y de forma en amor hacia los demás.
At least to try to follow that direction that makes us feel at peace and in love with others.
Yeah. That is, so long as we're under the sway of Vishaya Vasanas, we should try to be swayed only by the Subha Vishaya Vasanas rather than the Asubha Vishaya Vasanas. But that's only so long as we're allowing our attention to go back within. But what's most important in this path is maintaining that focus. We are not just trying to be a good person. We are trying to surrender ourselves completely, and we can surrender ourselves completely only by turning within. Yes, of course, when we're turning outwards, when we have a choice of doing a good action or a bad action, we should do the good action. That's obvious, but that's not. We can do any number of good actions, but it's not solving the problem. It's better to do good actions than to do bad actions, but it's better. The only solution to the problem is to give up being the doer and be the beer. And we can be the beer only by holding on to our being.
Yes. Sí, porque mucha gente al final se queda en esto, en tratar de elegir correctamente desde dónde va a decir, hablar o hacer, y no tanto el agarrarse a lo que somos.
Just because many people remain there or stay from where am I speaking, from where am I acting or something, and not to attend to that which we are really.
Yes. That's why Bhagavan's path, this is the direct path. This is cutting through all these things. So Bhagavan, if we understand Bhagavan's teachings, it's all about turning within. All the other things Bhagavan taught about karma and everything, the sole aim of what he taught about prarabdha is to make us understand, but by allowing our attention to go outwards, we don't achieve anything. Because what is going to be experienced is going to be experienced. What is not going to be experienced is not going to be experienced. We cannot change anything. So it's futile to concern ourselves about anything other than ourselves. The only thing that we should concern ourselves about is, who am I?
Absolutely. José, we have a new friend with us in the group.
I haven't said a word so far, so that's the best participation I could come up with. I think, thank you so much, Ernesto and Carlos, for bringing me in. I appreciate it, and also you, Michael, of course. Regarding that, I won't add much more to what has been said already, Vasana is problem. So want to be free of problem, gotta be free of Vasana. Want to be free of Vasana, gotta be free of ego. Turn your attention within, hold fast, don't let it go. Just hold on very fast. Like a monkey to his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So never let go.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's one more bit of a question, but we haven't really addressed. Carlos, you said, are these feelings an inevitable effect of looking for the restoration of our natural condition? That is, because we are looking for the restoration of our natural conditioning, firstly, just to clarify, our natural condition is ever present. It doesn't need restoring. As Bhagavan says, what is real is always real. We don't need to realize what is real. The problem is that we've now realized the unreal. So all that is required is for us to unrealize the unreal. In other words, we don't have to regain our natural condition. If we remove this ego condition, that is, if we remove our ego nature, our real nature alone will remain. But but we are seeking to remove our real nature so that we are seeking to remove our ego nature so that the real nature alone remains. That's our aim. Because that is our aim, we are trying to turn within. And the more we turn within, the more we will recognize our unfitness, recognize our lack of love, recognize the strength of our Vishaya vasanas. So yes, in a sense, what you say is true. It is an inevitable effect of striving for the restoration of our real nature, which is always present. Of course, it doesn't need to be restored, but because we are seeking to remove this ego, the more we are turning within, the more clearly we become aware of the vasanas and the strength of the vasanas, and the hold that these vasanas hold over us. Vasanas don't actually have any strength of their own. Whatever strength the vasanas have is strength that we've given them in the past by allowing ourselves to be swayed by them. So they seem to be very strong. They seem to have such a powerful hold on us, but actually they have no power of their own. Whatever power vasanas seem to have is power that we have given them. So let us not be perturbed by the power of our vasanas. But yes, true, the vasanas are very powerful, but the power they have is power we have given them. So since we have given them the power, we can deprive them of the power. And how do we deprive them of their power? By not allowing ourselves to be swayed by them. And how do we avoid being swayed by any Vishaya vasanas whatsoever? Only by holding on to self-attentiveness. And when we're holding on to self-attentiveness, we are holding on to the original source of power. That is all power. The original source of power is, as Ernesto said earlier, Chit Shakti. That is the power of awareness. All the power that we see outside manifest, the power of the mind, the power of all the powers of the universe, these are all a reflection of the infinite power of that is called Chit Shakti, the power of awareness. So by turning within and holding on to our being, we are tapping into that, to the source of all power. So by we are empowering ourselves by holding on to to ourselves, and thereby by empowering ourselves, we are enabling ourselves to remain without being overpowered by the vasanas.
So that
the whole thing comes down to just, that is Bhagavan's teachings. What we always need to remember with Bhagavan's teaching is there is one aim and one aim alone. That is trying to be self-attentive, trying to hold on to self-attentiveness more and more. Holding on to self-attentiveness, that alone is the real deep surrender. So how to surrender ourselves to grace? Only by holding on to self-attentiveness. How to overcome the vasanas? Only by holding on to self-attentiveness. How to avoid being perturbed by prarabdha? Hold on to self-attentiveness. Whatever the problem you mention, there's only one solution. Hold on to self-attentiveness.
Porque algo que además vemos muchas veces que cuesta asimilar es que si solo tienes como objetivo únicamente tratar de atenderte a ti mismo y dar esa respuesta siempre.
Because sometimes that we have to assimilate is that if we have as our aim to always attend to ourselves and do it keenly and always as much as we can.
Cada vez que tratas de atenderte a ti mismo, avanzas mucho más en la dirección de la purificación de tus vasanas.
Each time that you try to attend to yourself, you go much further in the purification of your vasanas.
Que a través de cualquier otra cosa.
Than through any other thing, any other practice or.
Yeah.
Lo que pasa es que cuando fallas tantas veces,
the thing is that when you fail so many times,
la sensación que se genera en la mente es de que no avanzas.
The sensation generated in the mind is that you're not progressing or you're not going forward.
Y entonces tiendes a buscar hacer otras cosas para compensar esa sensación de no avance.
So you try to compensate by doing all the things that sensation, to compensate that sensation of not making progress.
Cuando en realidad el haber seguido persistiendo y perseverando una y otra vez, a pesar de caerte 1000 veces,
But the fact that you've been persevering after falling over and over again, and you after that you try it again.
Eso te acercaría mucho antes a tu destino.
That would get you closer,
Yes.
much faster to your destiny.
Como cuando Sadhguru hablaba, ¿no?, del desarrollo de la fuerza externa, diciendo que si alguien se iba en bicicleta hasta Palokotu,
So when Sadhguru said like strengthening by increasing the strength, no era aprendiendo a montar, ¿no? Era.
Sí, que si haces el camino inverso, en lugar de ir hacia Tiruvannamalai, vas hacia Palokotu en bicicleta.
Sí, like the analogy of the bicycle, ¿no? When you go to
Yes,
Tiruvannamalai, Palakotu,
te parece que vas avanzando, pero en realidad te estás alejando.
it says you are going forward, you're getting closer, but you are getting further actually.
Yeah, no, that is what Bhagavan, what Sadhguru said is, if your aim is to go to Tirukoilo, which is north of Tiruvannamalai, and you have a bicycle, the wise way is to start on the road to Vellore, and by the time you're halfway there, you'll have learned how to ride a bicycle. Instead of that, if you start to cycle in the opposite direction, going to Tirukoilo, by the time you've learned to cycle, you're further away from your destination. So rather than trying to gain strength of one-pointedness by any other means, by doing mantra japa or dhyana or anything else, however weak we may be, let us start on going in the right direction, which is towards ourselves. So the best way, the wisest way to gain the strength that is required to hold on to self-attentiveness is to start trying to hold on to self-attentiveness from the very beginning.
Lo que pasa es que, a pesar de que decimos esto tantas veces,
despite the fact that we say this so many times,
sabemos que muchas veces muchas personas no lo quieren realmente ver.
we know that many people, they don't really want to see it.
Todavía prefieren hacer otras cosas.
They still prefer doing other things.
Y hay que respetar que eso sea así.
And that is to be respected.
Porque muchas veces esa sensación de avance, aunque sea en la dirección opuesta,
because sometimes that sensation of progress, even though it's in another direction or of the wrong direction,
finalmente les dará el impulso para tomar la dirección correcta que les lleve al destino.
Finally will make them do the right turn to finally take the right direction.
Ultimately, we all have to take the right, we have to turn in the right direction, because that's the Bhagavan says in the last verse of Arunachashtakam, just like the rain that has been evaporated from the sea, from the ocean, will not stop until it returns to the ocean. So it may rain on a mountain, it may fall down as waterfall or a stream, it may get caught in reservoirs, it may get evaporated again, but there's no rest for it until it returns to the ocean. And just like the birds flying in the sky, there's no place for them to rest in the sky. They can get rest only by returning to earth. Likewise, sooner or later, we all have to come to this path. There's no other way. But why to waste our time in the meanwhile? Let us, here and now, let us try our best to be self-attentive, and let us not be discouraged by our failure. Yes, inevitably we will fail. We will fail time and time and time again, but we should never be discouraged by our failure. In fact, we should be encouraged by our failure, because failure is the sign that we are trying. If we never try, we will never fail, but we will also never succeed. But if we try, inevitably we will fail again and again and again, but eventually we will succeed. So let us take every failure as a badge of honor, because that means we're at least trying to go in the right direction. And every effort to turn within is a big step in the right direction. So even if it ends in failure, at least we've tried. So let us keep on trying. However many times we fail, we should never be discouraged. As Bhagavan says in Nana, however great a sinner one may be, instead of lamenting, oh, I'm a sinner, how can I be saved? If one is steadfast in self-attentiveness, one will surely be saved. So we can take that sinner there. What is the primary sin is not being self-attentive. So however many times we fail to hold on to self-attentiveness, instead of lamenting, oh, I'm not able to hold on to self-attentiveness, this path is too difficult for me, I'm too weak, let us persevere in trying. Let us not be discouraged by any amount of failure. Let us just keep on trying. That is the only way to succeed.
Yes.
One thing that Michael, that we haven't mentioned, I think it's also that there is happiness in the path. I mean, the path, happiness and fitness.
Because
they coexist.
The more we turn within, the more we are surrendering ourselves. The more we surrender ourselves, the more we are taking the luggage of our head and putting it aside. So yes, the more we follow this path, though it may be a great struggle, though we may be failing, we are a lot happier than we would be if we were engaging in any outward activity.
Exactly. That's detaching yourself from all those things that we don't need, that that we are not, even like the body and the mind is, that in itself is happiness. I mean, it's time that you are able to that's a little bit it's a small taste of happiness and love for continuing the path. And I think what that happiness is, what between two moments of failure that we may have, that happiness is what stands in between. Okay, that happiness will make me fall and then stand up again. So
there's a beautiful verse in the Tirukkural which Bhagavan often used to point out. Yadalin, Nijnala Nodal, Adalin, Nilan. That means from whatever you withdraw yourself or you give up, you are free from the suffering caused by that. So the more we are turning within and letting go of everything else, the more we are freeing ourselves from the suffering of all these things. So this is the only real path to happiness. If we really want happiness, nothing else will satisfy us. Only happiness can only be found within. And happiness, infinite happiness is our ultimate goal. Infinite happiness will be experienced only when ego is destroyed. But even while we're following this path, because the more we try to hold on to self-attentiveness, the more ego is subsiding. And to the extent to which the ego subsides, to that extent we are happy. So however difficult this path may be, this is a lot happier than doing anything else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. We may, after we are in the battlefield of our will, fighting with our the Sadvasana, with our Vishayavasana. After being beaten, we may experience the failure.
Yes.
Yeah, but then it's just have the opportunity to try it again is encourages. That's what you say, Michael.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. And the more we fail, the more we recognize our powerlessness. The more we recognize our powerlessness, the more willing we are to surrender ourselves.
Yes.
So even the failures are helping us move in the right direction. I mean, we're not seeking failure, but when the failure happens, it's all part of the process.
Part of the fuel.
Part of the process of purification, of cleansing of our heart, making us more and more humble.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael.
All thanks to Bhagavan. This is all, it's only what Bhagavan has taught us we are talking about.